The Minnesota Wild are dead. And this one hurts because the body was warm. Minnesota walked into Denver facing elimination, opened the game like it had no interest in becoming a cautionary tale. For 20 minutes, the Wild looked less like a doomed team than a team that had finally found the exact shape of the fight. Marcus Johansson scored 34 seconds in, Nick Foligno followed. Before the first intermission, Foligno scored again, and after one period, it was 3-0. Minnesota on the road in an elimination game against a Colorado team that had spent most of this series proving how little room the Wild had for mistakes. A start like that should have brought them back some breath. Instead, it just delayed the suffocation. The official cause of death is acute respiratory failure, brought on by prolonged defensive zone compression, late-game airway obstruction, and the failure to convert a 3-goal lead into a boring hockey game. Boring matters here. A 3-0 lead in Denver can't become an invitation to survive by vibes. Concrete has to pour over that game. Wall work, clean exits, short shifts, dead pucks, quiet minutes. Ugly hockey, basically. Make a great team feel the clock instead of the comeback. Minnesota never got there. The first symptom was loss of territorial oxygen. Colorado didn't erase the lead all at once. That would have been cleaner, honestly. One sudden collapse, one bad bounce, or one ugly minute, and then we all point at the obvious wound. Instead, the Avalanche made Minnesota breathe thinner air, shift by shift. Parker Kelly's second period redirect cut it to 3-1. Scoreboard math still favored the Wild, but the game had already started moving away from them. Colorado was stacking shifts, extending possessions, and forcing Minnesota to defend under tension instead of defend with control. That distinction's everything. Controlled defensive teams make choices. Trapped defensive teams negotiate. By the middle of this game, Minnesota was negotiating with every puck. The second symptom was a narrowing airway. And here's where the autopsy stops being about effort. Nobody can say the Wild didn't care, or they came out flat, or they needed Nick Foligno to drag them back into the game while everybody else watches. Playoff hockey stops rewarding emotional proof once the opponent starts tilting the rink. Minnesota needed one stretch where nothing happened. No highlight. Forget a miracle save. Skip the cap resolve rush that gives everyone hope for 4 seconds. Just nothing. A dead sequence. Then another one. Chip it. Change. Freeze it. Breathe. Win a board battle. Eat the puck. And make Colorado start over from 190 feet away. Instead, the Avalanche keep finding circulation. Jack Drury made it 3-2 with 3:33 left. At that point, the lead still existed, but the room had changed. The crowd had the scent. Colorado had the extra attacker waiting. Minnesota had the terrible job of protecting a 1-goal lead against a team that wasn't asking permission. Then Nathan MacKinnon did what he does, and every person in the room knew where the danger lived. MacKinnon got the puck at the left side, found the short side window, and tied it with 1:23 left in regulation. That wasn't just a goal, it was the sound of the airway closing. A 3-goal lead became a tie game before Minnesota could even get to the elevator. The third symptom was overtime vascular collapse. Overtime pretends to be a reset, but this one didn't feel like a reset. It felt like a continuation of the same medical event. Minnesota still had one clean chance to flip the report. Kirill Kaprizov moved the puck. Matt Boldy had the one-timer. The shot didn't land clean, and in overtime, a missed clean look can become an organ, shutting down. Colorado turned the miss into motion. Martin Necas carried the puck behind the net, pulled the Wild coverage out of shape, and found Brett Kulak coming into the right circle. Not MacKinnon, not Cale Makar, and not the obvious villain with the spotlight already following him. Kulak ended it at 3:52 of overtime. Game over, series over, season over. Fairness belongs in the chart too. Jesper Wallstedt didn't kill the season by himself. He made 30 saves. For long stretches, he was the only reason the comeback didn't arrive, sooner. Kaprizov and Boldy will take heat because Stars absorbed the autopsy light first. That comes with the job. Still, this was bigger than one unfinished chance, one missed shot, or one late defensive mistake. Minnesota's real failure was structural. The Wild could start the game, wound Colorado, and create the first period script that every underdog wants. What they couldn't do was put the game under glass. That's the next step for this franchise. More romance won't solve it. Speeches about the state of hockey deserving better won't move the puck 6 inches off the wall when Cale Makar's forecheck pressure is arriving. Belief doesn't turn a tired clear into a controlled exit. The next Wild team has to learn how to make a great opponent bored, irritated, and late, because this season wasn't nothing. Minnesota beat Dallas. The Wild got through the first round, gave their fans an actual spring, and pushed into a second round measuring test against a Colorado machine that knows exactly what championship pressure feels like. That has value, but the bill came due. Game 5 collected it with 123 left, and overtime signed the receipt. So the diagnosis isn't cowardice, fraudulence, or the cheap internet version of a choke, where every blown lead becomes a moral failing and every eliminated team feels like it lacks character. No, this was acute respiratory failure. Minnesota still had breath right up to the end. Then Colorado compressed the chest till the Wild couldn't draw another clean one. So now comes the eulogy. The 2025-26 Minnesota Wild died in the thin air of Denver, but they didn't die as a joke. They died after proving something real, then discovering something harsher. That first period said they belonged in the fight. The last 40 minutes said belonging is not enough. A brutal lesson can still be a usable one. Wallstedt has to carry this forward without being crushed by it. Boldy has to live with the one-timer that could have changed the ending. Kaprizov has to remain the center of gravity without becoming the only emergency plan. Foligno gets to keep the 2-goal opening as evidence that this team still had teeth. For the Wild, the next stage is composure. Effort already exists. Identity already exists. Composure is the missing organ, because taking a 3-0 lead into a hostile building has to feel like locking a door, not a dare. The Minnesota Wild are dead. At 3:52 of overtime, the record ended. A 3-goal lead disappeared. Colorado kept breathing. Minnesota could not. Final diagnosis, acute respiratory failure. Manner of death was preventable, but not mysterious. The body will be released to the state of hockey. Thanks for watching.